I just want to welcome you all here. What I'm trying to do today is I thought about what to say about mobile, and there's a lot of opinions, a lot of points of view of what's going on. And as opposed to just give you my opinion, I have an opinion for everything. Not always right, but I'm never lacking opinion. And instead of doing that, I thought I would reach out to people who have actual data. And so this presentation is going to start. In the first half, I worked with a company called Flurry, who has a bit of data embedded in or a large percentage of the applications gone out. And also worked with a company called App Annie, who's aggregating stats kind of app store-wide for iPhone and iPad. And App Annie went over and beyond and really asked a lot of really hard-hitting questions about what's going on in the marketplace. And they scrambled their people and over a week put together some really kind of interesting charts, interesting data that I don't think has ever been shown before from their database that they've been collecting over the year. So with that, I'll just kind of jump right in, and we're going to have 15 minutes of questions at the end. Hopefully there'll be some good questions. It's a new space. It's a fun space. I'm enjoying it. It's one of the big focuses of my time. I like inventing and building things, and Big Fish Games is a big company, but mobile is a new and exciting area for us. So we're doing fun things, and I'm sure a lot of you out in the crowd are thinking about the space or doing really fun things already as well. So with that, I thought I'd introduce the company. I imagine most of you know who we are. Our major role in the games market is as a marketplace. We see it as our role to connect a certain segment of customers with a distinct but varying needs for content, with a very fragmented audience, a very fragmented network of developers that are building content for that audience, and really marrying those two together and making that into a large industry. And we've been doing this for 9 years. So jump right into some interesting data. This is a chart that Flurry has provided, and you may have seen this in a couple of articles where it was presented, but it starts to tell a story that apps are a big deal. Consumers have a love affair right now with apps. And if you look at this data, it looks a little bit suspicious. You say, well, how can apps really be exceeding web browsing, both on PCs and browsers? And PC and mobile device browsers. And the next slide kind of gives you a little more insight into how this could really be possible. So the almost indecipherable cream color there is games. So all of you are here for a reason. I assume it's because of games. But games have a much higher engagement factor. If you're playing a game, it's a lot different experience than going quickly to Wikipedia to look up some fact that most likely is true, but it's a long hang time, a long engagement application. I think without games, that chart in the previous slide, if you carved games out of this, which they haven't, but I imagine this slide would look dramatically different without games. That there's a lot of people who are engaging in games on mobile devices and playing for hours on end, and that's rivaling what a lot of people are doing on browsers. I think also contributing to that hang time is that the second biggest thing is social networking, and I'm sure that a few of you out in the crowd have spent a little bit of time on Facebook once in a while, some people obsessively so, and so that's also a big time sink. If you look at the news and entertainment, and if you were to take social networking and games out of both categories, I imagine web browsing would still be a very strong lead ahead of apps. But the bottom line, apps are real. Consumers love apps. They love the focused delivery of a specific need that an app delivers. You don't have to look for something, it's right there on your desktop, and they do seem to like it. It's interesting that how big a deal apps have become for mobile devices when you consider on the PC or Mac, installable executables have always been kind of viewed as a negative. It's a really strange phenomenon that on a mobile phone, such as an iPhone or iPad, apps are essentially executables. They're installed applications, but for some reason you put them in a really nicely run store and call them apps, and consumers absolutely love them, which works well for us because games are apps. Taking another look from Flurry data on who's playing games, This is a chart that kind of shows that there is a mainstream audience that are playing games. And that's good for everyone at this conference, being that this is a casual Connect conference. The other good thing that you can take away from this is that this audience is also educated. They're more affluent and younger. So if you extrapolate out 15 years of growth, you get wealthy, educated people that are engaging in content for a long time into the future, because they're just kind of entering their consumer adoption phase, and so they're going to be with us for a long time. So it paints a very bright, optimistic picture of the future for mobile apps. So the next set of slides are kind of a deeper dive into what App Annie provides. App Annie, I have a little, is Bertrand here? Why don't you stand up for a second? So I just want to call him out, as I am generally a fairly lazy person, and I had this presentation to give, and I could say a lot about Big Fish Games, but Bertrand and his team spent a lot of hours answering a lot of pages of emails, questions for me, and so thank you very much for your help. And in return, he didn't ask for this, but I offered to give him a nice little plug. But App Annie has been really useful for us to really understand what is going on in the App Store. And they work with a lot of companies, and they have a lot of data, and they can use that data to basically graph out and estimate sales, downloads, paid units for pretty much everything that's going on in the App Store in all categories. And so it's very powerful data. And all the following charts that you'll see were derived from their database of information. So first, looking at the adoption across countries, one thing that we weren't real comfortable is providing absolutes in this, but looking at relative and looking at iPad versus iPhone, you see some real interesting differences. One of which is look at the difference between China and Japan from iPhone to iPad. And if you think about the adoption of iPhone, they're driven by two factors. One is consumers want them, but the other is who is the network carrier that's providing the service. And if you think of the iPad, it's a much more neutral device, where iPad on Wi-Fi is not reliant on a carrier. So it's I think the iPad is a better proxy for actual mobile adoption by market. And if you look at what's happening in the iPad, it just recently was released in China, and it's moved ahead of many other countries that you see on the iPhone. And so if you look at the PC Mac landscape, it looks a little bit different than this. One of the other trends that's driving that is the increased prevalence of what I'll call in-app freemium virtual item purchases, which work very well in markets like China. So, when you're designing your game, you need to think about it as a global audience. The segment that says United States is shrinking every month. So as you build your content, you need to think about the global audience, and the global audience has become more and more important every year that goes by. So this is a really interesting one that I think is probably new to most everyone in the audience that haven't seen this data. And this is actual benchmarked against July of 2010. What is the total sales in the App Store by month benchmarked against July? And it points out three really interesting factors. One is it's growing, but not always. So we kind of looked at the data and went back and forth trying to understand these trends. And there's three main factors that affect the magnitude of sales in either the iPhone or the iPad marketplace. The first and the most obvious one is the install base. And a lot of people point to install base as the proxy for how much you can make in a marketplace. But it turns out, if you look at iPad there from December to March, no one threw away their iPads. So there's something much different than install base. And it turns out that consumer behavior for apps and buying apps is very concentrated in the first month you buy a new device. And that's true for iPhone, Android devices, and iPad, where you get a new iPad and consumers go on a bit of an app buying frenzy. And so if you look at that big spike on iPad, that's called Christmas. A lot of people got gifts of iPads over the holidays. And you can see the difference. And if you actually were to take out kind of December there, you'd see a general kind of trend line up that's pretty normalized. But there's another factor in there which is called seasonality. And we see this in casual games on PC and Mac. And I've been in this industry for 12 years, and I don't think a year's gone by that at least a dozen people haven't come to me in about mid-June, mid-July, and going, I feel this industry's dead. What's going on? I think we're in trouble. And yeah, we're in trouble. People are outside, they're golfing, they're gardening, you know. So there's a seasonality to games too, and that is kind of accounting for, if you look at the iPhone over there, a big part of their annual growth happens when people are adopting indoors and playing more games and using more applications. And then the fourth variable, of course, is new device introductions. So if you look at the recovery of the iPad, where the December effect wore off, and then the iPad 2 was released, and you see a big increase as people are buying new iPad 2s and loading them up with applications. Didn't see a tremendous spike in the iPhone when the iPhone 4 was released to Verizon. I think part of that was that there was a lot of people switching from AT&T is my only kind of way I can extrapolate that data, that already had applications, and there was a lot of kind of cannibalization of AT&T perhaps. I hope AT&T is not in the audience and contradicting me, but you do see a lot of spikes in sales in the App Store when a new device comes out and people adopt it and load it up with apps. So the net of this slide as well is that year over year, this is a 12-month chart, sales of iPhone apps and iPad apps have essentially doubled in 12 months. And I wouldn't expect that trend to look any different from a year from now. I think you'll see the same seasonal and kind of gift-giving purchase velocity increases over the winter months to really see another spike in sales. So casual genres, we're not making shooters, we're not making car racing games, most of us. And so do the genres that we're building work on iPhone? Do they work on iPad? And what's the difference? This chart shows something very interesting. Adventure. I would not have predicted that would be the #1 genre on the iPad. But if you take a step back and you think about it, it's not the #1 genre on the iPhone. But if you think about an adventure game, playing on a 2.5-inch screen is not a real fulfilling experience. Most adventure games are fairly large screen and require kind of a graphics view into the experience that you can believe and that is not as straining on your eyes. And if you look at the difference on the right, the graph on the right is indexed to iPhone as a percentage of game sales by genre. And I indexed each one of those and say, where are games overrepresented in iPad versus iPhone? So if you're building a role-playing game with virtual items, iPhone is a very robust place for those games. That is a much more vibrant market than on the iPad. But if you look at adventure games or puzzle games, they're over-indexed on iPad. And I think it goes a bit to the nature of the people who are buying them and the type of content and the type of experience you can get on the different size devices. Again, on a little note at the bottom, if anyone's doing quick math, that adds up on the left to far over 100%. When you submit a game to Apple, you can pick 2 genres to place it in, and so that adds up to 200%, not 100%. So this is where it starts getting a little more interesting for me. I'm as Big Fish Games, publisher to iPad and iPhone. And looking at what I asked Bertrand for was, I said, give me the top 10 publishers in June, which is the most recent data, and show me where they've been over the last 12 months. Partly because I knew what a trend would be for one of the companies in this graph, which is us. And partly I was just very curious just to see, are the leaders consistent leaders, or is it hit-driven where people spike up and then drop off? And you see a little bit of that. If you look at Pocket Gems and a few others that go flying up the charts, and then they wait for their next game cycle, and then they're back up into the charts. And then you see kind of more general purpose publishers where we release a large quantity of games. They all sell well, but it's not really a hit-driven industry, and we are seeing consistent growth over time. The number, if you look up on the right, the number 1 and number 3 is Electronic Arts and Chilingo, who are actually the same company now. So Big Fish Games in June was the number 3 publisher based on gross revenues on the iPad. So the thesis of this entire presentation is there an opportunity for casual games and mobile? If you're talking about traditional genres like hidden object, adventure, time management games, they're doing extremely well on iPad. And to a lesser extent, they're doing quite well on iPhone. iPhone time management games outperform hidden object games and adventure games. On the iPad, adventure and hidden objects far outperform time management games. So again, it depends a bit on the platform, but casual games are doing extremely well. All we do is casual, and to raise to the number 3 grossing publisher on iPad is a good proxy for how is this market for casual games. Also on the left, since I'm calling out things that artificially or realistically benefit Big Fish Games, I had them also do by genre. The one genre that we focus on is puzzle games. We submit our games into puzzle and adventure generally, and we are the #1 puzzle game publisher for the iPad in the world. That's a great stat that the casual game company is #1, and you could argue that both Rovio, PopCap, and Playrix, and even Chilingo are all casual game developers as well. So yes, puzzle games is a big genre, and it's dominated by casual game companies, of course. Electronic Arts is a little more diverse of a company and doesn't focus specifically on puzzle games. Then I said, well, there's a number of casual game companies publishing to the iPad, and show me how all of those companies are performing over time. And again, this is a bit self-serving, but it is to emphasize the fact that the opportunity is big and the opportunity is real. And we're working with a lot of developers. The vast minority, only about 4 titles that we've ever released are from our studios. The rest we're acting as publishers and as marketing agent to ensure that every title we launch gets discovered and achieves, a financial return that we're looking for and that the developer's looking for. So that is our position in PC and Mac, and it's proving that yes, you can go alone into the wilds of the App Store, but it's a dangerous route. Discoverability is a real challenge. So that's why I'll kind of start talking a bit about the opportunities and some of the case studies that we've been doing within the App Store itself. So mobile premium casual games, the discoverability challenge. The App Store is not targeted only at casual games. They serve a very wide ecosystem of developers, and they serve a very wide range of tastes of consumers. You get everything from Infinity Blade and first-person shooters to casual games to Doodle Jump, and they have the incredible challenge of trying to please all consumers and to please all developers within a single store, which is a very hard task to do. And Apple promotions tend to emphasize new releases. They get a lot of new content submitted to them, and when you're choosing what to promote, new and noteworthy is where most of the attention goes. That is what if you get discovered by Apple and you get a new noteworthy, you will get a week of good sales. Beyond that, it gets a little trickier. Cross-selling, cross-selling between titles is okay. It can create a better tail, but it'll never really get you up into the stratosphere of the top 10 list or the top 25 on iPhone to truly get discovered by the mass audience. The people using Apple's iPhone store and iPad store, it's a massive audience. If you can get your title up into a top 10 ranking, that becomes a feature unto itself, where Apple features are great, but a lot of people focus more on what is the community, what is the crowdsourced opinion about what is selling well, and they look at the top rankings for that. You can buy ads. You can buy ads to drive your way up. It used to be a little easier. There used to be a lot of CPI, cost per install opportunities where you could pay 75 cents per download. They were incentivized. These weren't actual consumers that are necessarily interested in your app, but it's a good way to try and drive volume to try and get highly ranked. Apple realized that this was a way to game the rankings. Wasn't truly the opinion of people consuming the apps. It was more a way of gaming that, and they disallowed that. And so now, if you look at the free rankings, it's more of there are still some legacy CPI opportunities out there, but most of the free charts now are truly people who are downloading the apps because they are interested in them. And buying ads now, it's not cheap. You can get people to buy your $5 app, but it's going to cost you about $50 to $80. That's not a great return on a single application. You can get someone to download your free app, but it's about $5 to $10 to get someone to download a free application via an advertisement. So ads alone are a very hard way to make a living in the App Store. There's also a strategy that a lot of companies had, which is I'll price my product at $7 and cut the price to 99 cents, and the 20 to 30 price tracking apps out there will indicate to people that, hey, this is on sale, and you get a spike of people downloading. The spike turns into a top rating, and your top rating gets you into the top charts, and lo and behold, you make more money. And that worked great when there was not 500,000 games out there. On iPhone with 500,000 games, and you get several hundred people a day or several thousand a day trying that strategy, it loses its effectiveness. And every time you do it, you're kind of devaluing your product to the people who are trying to buy it, and so when that sale's over, it drops a little faster, and it settles down into a lower long tail. And so it's a strategy that used to work. It's kind of a net zero strategy now, where you will get higher ranked, but the reduced price offset any real increase in revenue. So this is where a little bit of a little promotion comes in here, but I truly do believe that we're in a position, because of where we've come with PC and Mac, to make a difference for people designing the type of content that we are selling to our audience on PC and Mac for the iPad and the iPhone. And the reason for that is that we have a large existing customer base, and unlike most technologies, our audience, the mainstream audience, they're early adopters of iPad. That's not true for almost any other device in history, but iPad had this crazy appeal. My mother came over last Christmas and she said, "I want an iPad." And I said, "Why?" And she goes, "I don't know, I just want one." And I asked her how she found out about it, and she's like, "I don't know, everyone talks about them, and I want one." I'm like, "What are you going to use it for?" "I don't know, email." I'm like, "Don't you use your laptop for that?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "So why do you want one?" She's like, "I don't know, shut up, I just want one." So we went and bought her one, and she's now an avid gamer on the iPad. And she has pretty much given up her laptop and lives on her iPad now, and she loves it. So it's not, I wouldn't call it a fashion statement, but I'd call it a trend for I'll describe as very skewing a little bit older crowd to want this device, which is really rare for new technology. Usually we have 3 or 4 years to react to a changed technology, because our casual customer base are kind of the lagging adopters, not early adopters. That wasn't the case here. They moved very quickly, and they're a big part of the audience for the iPad and the iPhone right now. Our website attracts a lot of these people. We have 1 million paying customers on PC and Mac, over 1 million paying customers monthly on PC and Mac. A good percentage of them are adopting this platform. And we have 9 years of marketing and understanding their needs and wants, and how to speak to them, and how to really engage them in the content. We've also got a kind of a cool app that we've been cross-selling to all of our PC Mac customers. It's called Game Finder, that then extends their breadth or their awareness of games beyond PC and Mac into iPad and iPhone. I feel that to a certain extent, Apple should be paying us for making all of our customers aware that our games are also available on these platforms. But I think there's an opportunity where people will be buying on multiple platforms, that there's a big part of our audience that loves 26-inch screens. They go home with your puzzle adventure game, they dim the lights, and they got their 26-inch monitor, and they just immerse themselves in the content. You can't quite do that on an iPad yet. It'd be a little cumbersome to carry around a 26-inch iPad. I'm sure someone will try at some point, but there is still a place for the large screen kind of immersive entertainment. But if you're mobile, if you want to be down in the family room with people watching TV and play a game, it's the ideal device. iPads were also, just their form factor, their size, their input was almost designed for casual games, much more so than core games, much more so than arcade games. So we in June, we exceeded 2.4 million titles distributed, and all of them are networked together. That when we launch a new title, every title we've ever released will now promote that one title that we're launching in that one day. So it creates an incredible network effect. We have also, we've tried early on, we realized that releasing a game to the App Store is very different than PC and Mac. PC and Mac, we send it through a fairly rigorous QA. If you launch it, you get a few bug reports, you turn around to the developer, and the next day you get a new build out. We discovered that doesn't work quite so well in the App Store. You launch a game with a bug, and lo and behold, it takes the developer 3 days instead of 1 day, because it's a little more complex. And then you submit it to Apple, and you wait a couple more weeks before you can release it. In the meantime, you can pull your title, that's a little disruptive, and you get just destroyed by ratings. And ratings are what creates a long tail for your product. So if people are searching, a lot of the sales are not in the first week in our ecosystem. It's the long tail that's really important. So between the cross promotion between like titles, where if you like this title, you'll probably like the other titles that we're launching, and between the high ratings, it creates this very, very robust tail, much more so than in the PC and the Mac. And so, quality. 33 of 37 of our iPad games that we now have in the market are 4.5 stars or better. That's very hard, considering that a lot of people in the, traveling into the App Store, you get a game that's called Everest or something, and they download it because they think it's going to be an exciting action game, and they realize that they're looking for hidden, junk yards in a hillside, and they go, "This is horrible," and give it 1 star. And it's like, well, wait a minute, that's what the game's supposed to be. It's actually a high-quality game. It's just not what they're looking for. So achieving 4.5 stars means that you have a near-flawless product. Again, if you look at the top grossing, which is also important, I talked about the network effect and the high ratings. 100% of our titles that we've ever released on iPad are in the top 400 grossing iPad titles. 50% of them are right today in the top 200, and we've always had about 50% over the last 2 months. And 25% are consistently in the top 100. So casual games are doing extremely well on the iPad. Casual games on the iPhone are doing well, but it's a much more competitive market, and it's not as natural an environment, especially for the larger, more graphically rich products. So I said consistency matters, and pictures are worth 1,000 words. This is just if you open up and you see Big Fish Games, you see more apps by Big Fish Games. This is not staged. This is exactly how it looks. Every title up there has 4.5 or more stars. Our worst rated title is 3.5 stars. So since we had some really hard lessons in the early days, we realized that quality matters out the door, much more so than PC and Mac. You have one chance to make a first impression on the ecosystem there, and we have a very, very rigorous testing process now that so far we're knocking wood. For the last 5 months, we've had no products that we've had to relaunch. It's been a single launch experience. Network effect and rankings. This is a very pretty chart. This is top paid iPad apps. And this is a promotion we did where we did something that a lot of developers do, which is we reduce prices. And when you do that, you might get your title into the top 50, top 25. The network effect of having an interface on many millions of games, all promoting a portfolio of games, all at a very discounted price, means that you have 37 different feeders for this promotion, all cross-marking each other. So instead of getting X number of downloads and getting up in the charts, you basically get a lot of people buying every app or a big percentage of the apps that you offer. So you get somewhere between 10 and 37x the lift of a single title alone trying to do a price cut. And so this was a very powerful day for us. This was over the Mother's Day weekend, and we held every single one of our titles was in the top 25. We only had 25 titles at that time, but every single one of them was in the top 25 of all iPad apps, and we held that position for 4 days. And if you see right up there, Drawn hit #1, and it was #1 for 3 days, and it was the #1 application, not just game, but it was the #1 application for that entire time period. After the sale was over, there were still a lot of people circulating through these games because we had such a burst of sales. All the prices reset, and they stayed in those positions for almost 3 weeks where they were slowly drifting down, but the run rate was actually bigger than the revenue we made during the sale. The other thing that we can do that's kind of unique is that we have a massive PC Mac base. Last week, We introduced Mystery Trackers: The Void. It was a very high-quality game by Elephant Games that we released a few months ago on the PC and Mac. They produced an iPad version of it. And the day we launched the iPad version, we put a feature up here, cross-promoting, and it served two purposes. A, it educated our million-plus buyers that we now have the same games on iPad. Two, it gave the developer kudos for working with us, and as you can see on the right, which is almost cut off, but sales for his games while we ran this spot more than doubled. So it's a nice little cross-promotional opportunity, and a lot of people buying, we actually matched mids and emails that bought the PC game, also then went on to buy the iPad version. So the developer got actually a double hit there for both the PC and the iPad. Going pretty quick here, so I hope there's some good questions afterwards, but actually we're right on schedule. So talk a little bit about some case studies beyond that. I'd mentioned Mother's Day. So this is the front page of the App Store for the iPad. And this is not games, this is all apps. So we had 50% of the top 10 paid iPad apps for that entire 3-day weekend. That's a pretty dramatic achievement. And we're just getting started. You know, we have a lot of developers working with us, and we have a full pipeline. And there's been some comments, well, you won't give my title as much attention as if I publish myself or publish with someone who only puts out a few titles a year. And it's a lonely world if you only put out a few titles a year. The network effect is real. The network effect and the focused promotion work. We are becoming the marketing channel for Apple for this very specific type of content. And increasingly the feedback we get from our customers is that I go to your applications to find more games to download because the App Store itself has such a wide variety of games, it's very hard to find the type that I like. And so, you know, doing some marketing tests, we do what's called burst marketing, where we focus all of the games that we've ever released, have a promotional spot when you go into the game, and we pick one game 3 times a week and we promote it in every other title that we have. We also do an email burst to our entire paid audience. We feature it on the web page. And you can see this results is we took a time management game, Megaplex Madness. This is actually an iPhone game, I believe. This is an iPad game, and it's basically drifting down the rankings. And without spending money, we basically bursted all the way up to number 5 in all games. And we do that 3 times a week. And what that does is that you don't get one bite at the apple. Nope. Actually, that wasn't even supposed to be funny, even though it kind of is. But what I mean by that is you don't get just a big burst of sales upon launch and then a long tail. We're able to remarket a game consistently every few weeks to every few months right back up into the high rankings. And so your tail is not this low run rate. It's called getting burst up and then having a big, robust sales cycle that then slowly drifts down. And then just as it's hitting its tail, you fire it right back up. And we have the capacity to do that 3 times a week right now very, very effectively. This is an adventure game on iPad. This was Drawn. So Drawn, you saw on Mother's Day, hit number 1. Drawn had been out for 8 months when it hit number 1. That was not a new title. And here's just showing that we had a price that was $9.99. It did well. We burst marketed up at a high price, and it sold extremely well from a revenue standpoint. But it's a high price, and it started drifting down. So we did a remarketing effort and pushed it right back up. We cut the price to $6.99, I believe, and got it back up into the top 25 of games, and then turned it back to $9.95, and the run rate was higher than it was before we did that. It eventually drifted down again, but then we just burst it right back up. Hidden object on iPhone. This is a very challenging genre for us on iPhone, but we're very effective here as well, where we took a very old game. This is a 12-month-old game. It's a game called Buckingham Palace, Hidden Mysteries Buckingham Palace. It's a hidden object puzzle adventure game. And it was 12 months old, and we hit it with everything we had just to see what we could do on the iPhone. And we got it up from non-existent to number 27 in all games. On the iPhone, that's a remarkable achievement for a 12-month-old game that really requires a big screen to really experience it. And we did that on a 2.5-inch screen iPhone. And this final slide is just a pitch. When I have a big audience, captive audience, we have a very loyal customer base, and they do a lot for us. A lot of the people in this room have a livelihood because of our audience. for the last 2 years, this will be the third year in a row, we're going to have a big promotion, not a big promotion, a big fundraiser around breast cancer awareness this fall. If you look at the game developers down below, we're going to be hitting you up for a sponsorship. We did just shy of $100,000 last year. We want to double that this year. And so since I have a captive audience, I might as well take advantage of it and let you know that if you work with us, we will be trying to hit you up. It's of course voluntary, but it's for a good cause. These are the people, this is a disease that targets the people who are keeping the lights on and paying our bills, and we need to appreciate them and do something nice back. So that's oop, got my card to end my presentation. Very good timing. That was a lot of rambling. There was some fun data at the beginning, which I should probably back up to, but I would like to open up for some questions, and feel free to ask anything about what I presented or anything else that you want to know about mobile or Big Fish Games. Questions? Thank you. You can just talk loudly. I'll repeat the question. Yeah, there's two types of relationship. There's one where we already have an existing relationship and they've built a game on PC and Mac that was successful and that resonated with our existing audience. And that's a pretty straightforward deal. That's basically, it's going to hit our customers. Our customers have already shown that they like it. It's pretty predictable how it did on PC and Mac is very reflective of how it'll do on iOS. The other type of arrangement that we'll be doing increasingly through this summer, and you'll see some really interesting releases, is what we call outlier content. And that's content that was built specifically for iOS, meaning it was built for iPad or iPhone. And it's kind of the reverse, where we're going to launch it first on iPad and iPhone. And we call it outlier because we feel our audience, and the testing shows that our audience will embrace it. It's not the typical hidden object puzzle adventure game. It's more catered to that device. But we will launch it initially on the iPad and the iPhone, use our audience to get it very highly ranked, and when it's highly ranked, it will attract a much broader audience. These are the games that I would describe as almost universally appealing, which means our audience will like them, and they've shown that they like them, but when you get them highly ranked, you'll attract a much more diverse set of interested audience. You'll get young kids, you'll get teenagers, you'll get 30-somethings, you'll get 70-somethings playing these games. And then we'll take that game and we'll bring it back to the PC and Mac and launch it onto our existing online portal for those platforms. And so, does that answer your question? Did I repeat the question after you asked it? What are the typical arrangements or what type of typical content you do to work with developers on getting games to iOS? So, questions?
Okay. Hi there. What's your revenue? What's the revenue share range in that market?
I'm not going to answer that directly because it's confidential in all the contracts. And it does vary. If it's something where we are adding a ton of value, if it is a hidden object puzzle adventure game where basically the sales are generated by almost purely our marketing, it's a different rate than if it's what I'll call an outlier content, where we're just giving it a little shove up and the content really is selling itself. And so it is a wide range, but it's not based on our developer relationship, it's more on the content relationship.
Marketplace do you think Google will be for you going forward, Android versus Apple in the next 5 years, for example?
That's an incredibly hard question to answer. It's right now, Android has a bunch of huge benefits being an open platform. Open platforms historically have been very widely adopted and much easier. What Apple has going for it is just this trendy, safe environment that's easy to use. And right now, the trendy, safe is kind of winning out for the casual game consumer. Android, I would say, skews more towards early adopters of traditional technology. And so going forward, it's incredibly hard to predict. I think the stats of Android surpassing iPhone were pretty skewed by the number of network carriers. And when Verizon picked up iPhone, that halted that advancement. Android's a great operating system and it's an open environment, but it's a little bit harder for someone who's not tech savvy to really understand it. I have one of the new Galaxies S's, and it's a great platform, but it took me quite a while to figure out really what was going on and how to get different app stores opened on it. And the first app you download from whether it's from Google or from Amazon or any other app store, it's a really painful process. Once you get the first app down, it's very easy. But there is a learning curve with Android that does not exist with Apple. And so I think you'll see a lagging adoption by the casual consumer for Android. But if they continue to evolve, it should be it's a horse race no one can predict, really. It's two very different approaches to a market.
Can you take us through the average, right here? Can you take us through the average economics of a game in your network? The average number of downloads, average revenue, average lifetime value of a person who downloads the game, to give us a better understanding of the profit or loss associated with most games.
Yeah, it's early days, so I can give you some kind of early estimates of what we see trending. Too far. So, we see that a game that does $1 million on PC and Mac, our sweet spot is these adventure games, whether it be hidden object or just straight puzzle adventure. Our forecast looks like it's about half that for iPhone and iPad combined over a 2-year period. So that'll give you a sense of the magnitude we're seeing. Some games are skewing higher than that, almost matching what they do on PC and Mac. Some are falling short because of the type of content just doesn't resonate with that device. But it's meaningful and it's growing. And so it's very hard to predict because our run rate that we were seeing 4 months ago is very different and smaller than the run rate we're seeing today. So our estimates are constantly going up. But right now, if I had to give an answer, it would be in that range, that whatever you do on PC and Mac worldwide, about half of that we would see with the typical casual game on iOS.
Can you go over the revenue streams, in-game advertising, download pay, or what?
Right. For the Apple App Store, we've decided to focus purely on a freemium in-app unlock the whole game. We don't have advertising in our products, so what's missing from some of these publisher metrics are developers who are building purely ad-supported games. App Annie tracks actual dollar transactions, whether that be virtual currencies, virtual items, or in-app unlocks, or impulse buying, buy-only games. We, as a company, have these largely linear games that have a beginning, middle, and end, and don't really cater to a virtual currency and don't really cater to enough replayability to make ads really pencil. If you have a different mechanic that is infinitely replayable, ads work, and if you can create an environment of status, then virtual items can be a very viable way to monetize. This linear content that we're currently focused on today is monetized through transactional purchases. Other questions? That's also very different than you see on Android, where the diversity of the marketplace Angry Birds, I believe, launched originally on an ad-supported version, where they felt that would get wider adoption and could monetize better. We will be launching on Android. We have not yet, and so I can't comment on that. Other questions?
Can you give us a range, your most successful game, how much it made, and your least successful game?
I could if I had it, and I'm not trying to be evasive. I just don't really actually have that data. I gave you an estimate, and it's also a lot of our most successful games have only been on the market 1 or 2 months. And so, as I said, you don't make or break a title in the first month. We can make more in month 3 sometimes than we made on month 1. And so, because the App Store is growing, the install base is growing. You saw the trend on. So this trend, if you launched a game in February, March, it's conceivable that your game would make a lot more money 3 months later in May, June if it was properly marketed. So I'm not going to give you an exact number because it's just such early days. Perhaps Bertrand can answer that, or probably doesn't want to either. What is a really successful game? What does a top 10 game make on iPad and iPhone? Or don't want to answer that? Doesn't want to answer that. So if you want an answer to that, they do have the data, so you can always subscribe to their data. So there was another pitch, Bertrand. Other questions?
Do you feel that labeling games as HD on the iPad actually makes them more effective in sales instead of simply releasing something for the iPad?
I think the HD thing was a big deal early on. I think people kind of ignore it now. We still put on our content because even if it makes it, 5% of the people more attracted to it, it doesn't hurt to do it. HD is kind of expected. If you release something that's not resolution of HD on iPad or their maximum resolution, you get very much beat up in the ratings. So everything we release now is HD and will always be HD on that platform. There's rumors around the next device having even higher resolution, so I'm not sure what they're going to call that is SHD, super high def. I'm not sure. But I think the label was important early on to really raise consumer awareness so they noticed, and that's probably a large reason why they beat up on content that wasn't HD. But now it's kind of the norm, and so I think it's lost a lot of its effectiveness.
I wonder, you mentioned that you've got about 1 million paying customers per month. So kind of what's the trend line in that paying customer base over some period of time? I'm wondering kind of how much it costs you to acquire new customers and what the most effective ways you are doing that. And the third question related to that is, how much customer data do you share with developers that publish games on your site so that they can actually own some of that themselves? Thanks.
So the number I gave you is we have over 1 million charged customers per month, so it's over that, and that's only for PC Mac worldwide. There's no easy way right now to deduplicate our PC Mac business from our iOS business, so those numbers do not include any iPhone or iPad purchasers. In 2010, we did well north of $130 million, and we grew over 30%. Those are the only stats that are really public right now. But there's no real easy way based on what we collect from iOS and from our in-game statistical, whether it be Flurry or our own tracking packages, to track unique users and duplicate them across to our audience for two reasons. One is they're different unique identifiers. The other one is that piracy is real on all platforms, just as it is on iPad. And if you look at the amount of sales we get on iPad, and then you look at the number of unique UDIDs coming in that hit that level that's beyond the paywall, they don't match, meaning that there is quite a bit of piracy, and so you have to dedupe that from that number as well. With developers on the PC and Mac, we provide them data on just downloads, conversion rates, sales. We don't break it down into a lot of detail by geography or by any personal customer information. That's all kept proprietary. Yes, 5 minutes. Any other questions?
Do you see piracy as a problem on iPad, the paid apps, one-time downloads?
Yeah, I mean, if you look, unfortunately, piracy is a problem on all platforms, on all applications. I mean, even Microsoft, with their incredible workforce, battles it even with their operating system. That piracy is just a very hard thing to evade. I've always said that I love our customer base for many reasons. One of the main reasons is they don't generally pirate content. The casual consumer is typified by a skewing older female, and they're not the ones that are usually visiting the Juarez sites or, fixing their iPhone so that it gets all the content for free. It is a problem, and you notice the problem skews worse. We'll do UDIDs by country, and the gap or the difference between what we earned in revenue and what our stats say unique users actually bought the game gets much wider in the typical countries where piracy is a little bit more rampant and where intellectual property isn't really supported or defended as it is in some countries. So it's a big problem, and it always will be. I think there's a lot of technologies coming in the future that could make a big difference. Cloud-based computing is an interesting concept where if a lot of the computing power is in the cloud, you can hold stuff back where they will never be able to pirate the full version. There's a lot of advanced DRM things that are coming out that will prevent it, but it's always a cat and mouse game.
So one more follow-on question to that. Do you think giving only a part of the game for free and then using in-app purchase to unlock the whole thing solves part of the problem?
Yeah, unfortunately, there is some evidence that in-app purchase is that the typical way you pirate iPhone or iPad content doesn't work with in-app purchase, which is a good thing. The bad thing is that we generally will release products for both in-app purchase and buy only. And the reason is that there's different shoppers. Some people look by brand, recognize a brand, and they'll impulse buy, or they use price as a proxy for quality. And so we launch both as in-app purchase and a buy-only option. And so if you're a pirate and you want to get the content for free, you go for the buy-only option. I think a lot of the virtual item in-app purchase companies aren't experiencing the piracy that a unlock full game company does. One more question, then we're done. Is that a question way in the back or a stretch and a yawn? All right, well, thank you very much. I hope this
One more question.
Okay, one more question.
You mentioned early on that you didn't feel that lowering prices was a good strategy, but later on you showed some slides where you had some good results from doing it promotionally. How would you differentiate when it's good to lower prices and when it's bad?
Yeah, and what I was referring is to with a single application, if you lower the price, you'll get discovered by X number of people, and that'll change your ranking by that proportionate amount. Because all our games are networked together, and when we did a price promotion, when someone saw X number of people downloaded game A and Y number of people downloaded game B, a lot of the people who downloaded game B went on to purchase game A because they were cross-marketed within game, and there was a content-wide sale. And so you got this network effect where instead of getting boosted by X, we got boosted by somewhere between 10 and 15 times what you would get with a single game sale. So the network effect is what made the big difference for us, and we got all our titles into the top 25, which established an ongoing feature and kind of run rate that was much higher. If you have a single game and you don't make it into the top 10 or the top 25 on iPhone, it didn't really help you. All you did was cut price, and it's kind of a net neutral for revenue. Thank you very much.